super excited today to have the Lifetime Achievement team today to present the behind the scenes. So let's welcome the team. Yay! Hey everyone! So this is the team of Lifetime Achievement. We have Ziporen, we have Yonatan, the mysterious Yonatan, Tyler, and Daniel, and I think David, right?
Yeah.
And Alissar.
Alissar.
Yeah, one dead middle.
Alissar in the center.
I thought I heard my name, but I didn't think of it.
All right. So without further ado, I'm giving it up to Yonatan. Take it away.
Hello, boys and girls. Good morning. Welcome to Braid's live stream. My name is Yonatan Tal. I'm the founder and creative director of Braid. And this morning, we have a wonderful presentation with me and my team. We're going to show you some behind-the-scenes magic from Lifetime Achievement, our first project. So let's get to it, guys. I'm going to share my screen. Now it's going to be this awkward moment after this build-up where I would take a long time to share my screen because, hey, 2020, Zoom light. Good? Lifetime Achievement?
Yeah.
All good.
Cool. So, where should I start? Should probably start at beginning. So we're going to start at the beginning. I'm going to tell you about how the story came about. So, a long time ago, 5 years ago, I went to London, and I was just this poor student, was just a little tourist going around, and then I ran into this beautiful designer store called Dover Street Market. And I was kind of shy, or I was afraid to go in because I looked so like inappropriate for the place. The store was so beautiful. It was kind of like a combination of an art museum and a designer store, and I was so amazed by everything that I saw around me. I just walked around the exhibitions that were there, and I was just so amazed by the craftsmanship of everything. And I thought, like every single item here is so meticulously done, so beautiful, and it gave me this idea to back and think about how every item is made in those kind of stores. And that was kind of like the initial thing that drew me into this idea. So I was thinking about how in animation every single frame is so meticulously done, and how we care about our process. And I wanted to bring it to that fashion world and to think of an exaggerated way to show that kind of process. On top of that, when I was in that store, I saw this salesman, and he was just ignoring me because he knew that I couldn't afford anything in that store. And so I looked at him, it was like super cocky, didn't even look at me. But then there was this like older, fancy lady who came in right after me. And then everyone, all the salesmen, just approached her and greeted her and kissed her ass. And it was amazing to see. I was really interested in that world. And that was kind of like the idea that sparked at that moment. That was 5 years ago when I was still at school. And that didn't become anything when I was at school. It was kind of just like in my drawer for a while. And after I went to work at Disney, And then I left in 2019. Then I wanted to come up with a pitch for a VR short. And that's how this story came back. I was like, this is going to be so cool to see in VR, to flesh out this journey, to see that character goes through all those like different places and to really push it and make it exaggerated. And I thought about how in VR, having all those different places and locations be in one experience, I thought that would be really cool. And to be basically teleported from one place to another. The teleportation aspect of it wasn't there at the beginning. So I had that, and I started to flesh it out. It was interesting, and it was like visually, interesting for me to work on. Story-wise, something was still missing for me. I didn't know why, and I thought about it for a while, and then I thought, I'm just not, I just don't care enough. It's nice, it's cool to, show different locations, and it's appealing in VR, but then why am I working on that? Why is this story important, and why does it matter? Basically, what I found out is that I lacked the why, basically. The why should Albert create that thing? Because he's already very, very highly acclaimed, and he's reached every peak in his career, and he doesn't really need to make another thing. But he needed to make it for someone. That's what I found out. I needed the journey to be for something that's more sentimental, something that is made for someone that he loves. And I have a really strong relationship with my mom. And I kind of took me there. So I introduced mom into the story, and the whole story became about this thing that he's making for her birthday, this jewel that he's really invested in, and it was all about their relationship throughout the story. Now, at the beginning, it was a little different. At the beginning, the first version was that mom was actually at the end at the hospital, and he gets this like call, and she's unconscious, and this like whole dramatic thing. And as long as the more I worked on it, the more I felt like it wasn't really my story to tell. It wasn't my story at all, and it just didn't feel right to take that approach. I thought it was also more melodramatic and also a bit of cliche. So I was looking for something that I could connect with more. And I thought about my relationship with my mom and my anchor in there. And then I dialed it back to just, interaction between them and what I could find there. And the next version was more about their communication. So the jewel then evolved into a communication device, basically. So he gave her this thing where she could touch it and then basically like a walkie-talkie talk to him. And so that was the next evolution of this story. I showed it to a friend of mine that I trusted his opinion, and he looked at it. He was like, "This is great, but this communication device is just like a phone, right? Like we see her call him throughout the film, and then what is the difference? What is the difference between this communication device and just a phone? I know, they both have that device, but it's not very different." So then I had to go in again and think about what else, like what is this jewel really for? And I went on a trip to Dover Street Market, the same store, but in LA, where I live. And I did a little research trip to get inspired. And one of those jewels looked exactly like, I mean, really, really close to the final jewel. That was the initial inspiration for how it actually turned out. I also wanted to make it kind of like a candle shape for birthday, but still the point in the middle was like an emergency button or a communication device. And so I still had something to figure out, something to make click. And that's how the final version of that that element actually came about. So then teleportation was brought in. And I think that it wasn't a coincidence that teleportation became a thing, because it came directly from my world, actually, because I live far away from my family. I always crave being around them and going back. I go back twice a year, but it's never enough. And we always wish that we could just, hop and be around each other whenever we wanted to. So that was the next evolution. That was really where I found my own truth in this relationship and the more, sentimental part of the story. And that's where I could really connect to it. The other thing in there was in the story was inspired by one incident where me and my siblings were throwing a surprise party to my mom, but we were so stupid because we knew that there was going to be a surprise party with all of her friends in the evening. And so the entire day we just ignored her, and we were like, okay, we know that there's going to be a big party, so we just didn't acknowledge the fact that she had a birthday. We didn't celebrate. We didn't do anything. And by the end of the day, she was so bummed, and she was like, she just didn't want to do anything. So we learned our lesson, and that was kind of like that inspired that part of the story where Albert is just so sidetracked by making something beautiful for his mom that he just doesn't exist up until that point for her, because in his mind he's invested and he's doing something for her. So he couldn't really tell the difference between making something for someone and knowing that you're doing it, and actually them knowing that you care, and them knowing through the journey that that you give them any attention. By the way, the initial, what you see here, the ring was also based on the ring that Mr. Big in Sex and the City gives Carrie. So that's how gay this film is. It's very gay. All right, so teleportation was introduced. Definitely because LA and Israel are two places that are. And then everything was in place. Then everything was in place for the story to be written. And at this point, I went ahead and I wrote a written script. So everything was put down on the page. That's what I worked with to board from, and for all the teammates to be on the same page, and for the actors, obviously, to record from. And after I had the whole script, I had thousands of versions of the script. I went ahead and I storyboarded. So the storyboard actually takes a very classic approach, because I'm coming from 2D animation and I'm used to just boarding flat. And so I boarded everything flat for the sake of VR and the point of view and folks in the audience. My idea was to board Albert all the time. Just the point of focus is what's boarded. So as long as we see Albert, as long as Albert is the most interesting thing in the scene, or is looking at the most interesting thing in the scene, then the audience can follow the story easily. That was the whole approach of the entire film. So that's how I boarded. I just had Albert and what he's doing. And of course, you had in the scene, you had other things around you. But, as VR creators, we know that you should not distract too much with other stuff around you and focus on what you want to, the story that you want to tell. So after doing the boards, or actually a part of the process, the most difficult part of the process for me was the ending montage. Because everything else kind of made sense. The journey was all figured out, but it was kind of like a fine line with the ending and the way Albert realizes what he did wrong and realizes that he was too tunnel visioned on his approach and his craft, and he wasn't there for mom. That's the whole point. Presence. So I had a few takes for that thing. I had the first version, which was him calling her, and we actually have a split screen and we see her and she's disappointed. But then that went away because I didn't want to show her through the journey, because I didn't want the audience to know her state of being. I just wanted them to experience the situation the way Albert experiences it. So all they know is that he's making this beautiful thing for mom. She's calling him, but he's too invested. I wanted the audience to be as invested in the journey as Albert and be tunnel visioned on his goal, which is making the jewel, not talking to mom. And so in the first version, the end looked like that. So we had a montage, but it was kind of like illusions that Albert saw around him of mom calling him in all those situations when she called him through the journey, and she gets disappointed, and then he realizes that he hasn't been there for her the whole time. And that was okay. That kind of conveyed the point, but it wasn't the strongest. So then the second version was different in that we did see him come to be with her whenever she calls him. So the whole montage was she's calling him, but instead of being too busy to talk to her, he actually comes and hangs out with her. So that's kind of like his fix. Then the final version, actually, so I was fine with the last version, but was still not there, and I couldn't find it, and I went crazy. And I think one day I talked to Ziporen, my amazing producer that you're gonna meet soon, and I told her about that problem, and she was like, it could have been nice if they actually did those things together, and something like that. And I was like, no, that doesn't make sense. I don't think that's gonna work. And a few days later, I was like, you know what? Yes, actually, it's going to work. And I tried it out, and it was. I think it was the best version of it. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't too confusing. It wasn't like a different, like they didn't go back to those places. It was just the way Albert thought about it in his head. Like, oh, that could have been what I've done for her. But I think eventually we got to strike this like fine line and find a way for it to look like a what if sequence, and that's something that's actually happening. Then there was another bit of the story that didn't make it to the end, and it was that mom actually goes to sleep. She wakes up in the morning, then she finds the jewel by her bed, and then she clicks it, and then she screams because it teleports her back to the living room, and then you have the emotional scene. But that I didn't leave that in because I want to keep the scene. I wanted to keep the scene more happening in the same kind of like in the same time. I didn't want the night to pass and all that, and also that just didn't fit. Now design was definitely a big part for me, because it's about this designer. It's all about his craft and his fashion, so that had to be a strong point. And Albert actually started as way more cocky, way more arrogant, not so approachable, call it that. I think at the beginning he was called Jacques, and that's where he kind of started. And then from there, as I was working on the story, it changed. So I did like a quick Quill pass on this character, and that's the crappy version of how it was at the beginning. So I made it more Quill friendly, and came up with this version of Albert that was the mid version. And I did this animation test to see how this character functions. So this animation test, I actually really like it. It's very different than the way it turned out eventually, because stylistically it's way more cartoony, way more pushed. Everything is more flexible, and Albert is even more sharp, I guess. And then again, like, I like this version, but the more I developed the story, the more I worked on the storyboards, the more Albert evolved naturally. And that happened because when I worked on more emotional, grounded scenes, we see the true Albert, like the way he is, then he became, I kind of got to know him better, and I kind of warmed up, and he warmed up to me as the story evolved. And then he just became just nicer and more approachable. That's one of the scenes that didn't make it to the final thing, where he kind of plans the jewel in kind of like a hologram AR mode. So those kind of scenes and the scenes at the end really made me figure out the character more. So he became more cute and nice. He's still very sassy. He's still very like cocky in a way, but a little more approachable. And those are the final costumes. We had to have, lots of different costumes. He had to change clothes every single scene. One, because he's a fashion designer, and also because I wanted to. It was so much fun to do all those different costumes. So every single scene, he has a different costume. I still make sure that it's recognizable, because his shape is very distinct. And he actually goes through his own arc with himself and also with the audience, which I thought was interesting. At the beginning, he's this very sassy, very cocky, unapproachable character. He sasses you in many occasions. And then he starts to tell his story. And then when you see him throughout the journey, he is more in his element. He does what he loves, and he's more happy, and he's just focused on his craft. So you see the other side of him being very passionate about his work. And at the end, the last part, you see him being really vulnerable, very emotional. So you see his full range of emotion and state of mind. And then at the end, he goes back to the Albert that we know at the beginning, and he's, being sassy to you and tells you that you can't afford anything in the store anyway. So you see the full range of character. Mom was also a really fun character to work on. The initial design was by Jason McLean, my good friend. He did the big brushstrokes, amazing designer. And then I took his designs and made it more closer to the style of Albert and more Quill friendly. And that's how the final design of Mom came about. And we have the side characters, which I also love. Like Vanessa is maybe my favorite character. I wish she had more screen time, maybe in the future. But they were also very fun to work on because it's almost always the case where the side characters are more playful and more out there. So Vanessa and Lorenzo. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the environments. The environments were inspired by stage design, by scenic design. I really loved the idea of having those big monumental environments, and every one of them has its own style, like its own world, its own tone, very big shapes. So, and also very minimalistic. It's very like serving the purpose of the location and tells a certain story. So I took inspiration from environments for the store. Specifically, I took inspiration from one really classical architecture, European, but some of them looked a little more modern, even for the time where they were created. Some of them were more like Art Deco. And then the other side of it was very modern, super pushed in crazy shapes, more round and streamlined and clean. So that was the combination that I wanted to get out of the store. And the actual style of the show, I looked a lot at Maurice Noble, which is one of my heroes. He was the layout artist for all the classical Golden Age Looney Tunes cartoons. He worked closely with Chuck Jones, and those are my favorite by far Looney Tunes out there. So I wanted to see if this style actually worked in Quill. And I took one of these pieces from one of my favorite cartoons for backgrounds, and I remade it in Quill directly. I didn't want to change anything. I just wanted to see if it felt okay. And I just made it in Quill, and I kind of like moved my head around and tried to see if the flat designs actually worked in 3D space and in VR. And I really liked the way it turned out. And I thought that was a good approach for Quill as well. And so that was something that I started with. It did evolve with time as well, because we didn't have the contour lines at the end, and the lighting here is a little more pushed than what we ended up having. Maybe in Mom's house we have more of like a spotlight situation, but for the majority of it, it was a little bit different. For the store was definitely the most difficult to approach, because there's so much going on there. And I had several takes. It was really just hard to wrap my head around the environment. So I ended up going in and I did a little sketch in Quill. I did like an environment sketch to figure out the structure. It was really chaotic at the beginning, but I just wanted to know the placement of things and how everything worked in scale and in space. So after I did that, I did this little floor plan. So I know where the audience is and how they can look around, because the first scene is totally a 360 scene, and you have to be in an exact spot to see everything around you. So I had to plan that out really carefully. And then I kind of went back and forth with the design, and I flashed out some of the elements on Photoshop, and I went back and edited to the scene, and I just went back and forth. At the beginning, it was just not going there. It was very chaotic. And I kept going back and forth. Those are some of the elements that didn't make it to the final one. There was like a candy machine with golden diamonds, and this like golden spaceship with sneakers. I kept adding things, and eventually that's the final result that we know from the film. But yeah, it took several passes to get to this, but I felt like that was the right approach for and the right personality of the store for Albert. And it had exactly the spatial, like everything was placed in the right spot, so people can actually follow. There was a lot of introduction in this scene, so it was important that it wasn't too distracting, but also when you turn your head, you discover something new around the corner. And for the other scenes, I made a ton of sketches. I started on my sketchbook, and then for each scene, I had different references. So I always made this like this main, like key for the environment, so I just know what's going on. For this environment, the underwater one, I got the inspiration from this modern-looking structure on the left, and then in the middle you see a very special natural pool in Israel called the Hexagon Pool, where they have this hexagon-shaped rocks that formed naturally there. It's really beautiful, and that's what inspired the structure of the underwater cave. And the colors were inspired by actual underwater photography. Just pushed, I guess, because it seems like the rocks glow when Albert, illuminates them. For the lab was inspired by the Natural History Museum in LA. The main hall when you enter has this gigantic skeleton, and then the other dinosaur skeleton that I sketched later on my sketchbook, made it to Photoshop, and then to the final environment. That's the final environment that was also inspired by a bunch of, like old-fashioned electricity and like the devices study, as well as some amoebas that I looked at to create that environment. Then the gold tasting room, we call it the gold tasting room because it's like wine tasting, but with gold. So it was inspired by classical French decor. It was also really fun to work on. The peeing boy was inspired by the statue in Belgium, very famous. Then the carving studio was a really fun one because it started as something pretty plain. It was like this nice idea of Albert carving this gigantic rock into this tiny piece, because I wanted to show this, very careful approach where, like, from this big material, he takes only the finest piece for the jewel. And it was inspired by all those carving studios and marble made locations that I thought was beautiful. I'm kind of obsessed with marble. And the initial sketch on the left is what I started with to think about the structure itself. And then I went in and I did some detail work and designed all the sculptures that I took from different places, from my, things that I found around me when I was sketching in LA outside, when it was allowed. And then I put it together. That was the final, and also, that that came in because I was a little bored with the scene at some point, and I thought it was nice that he's carving, but what if he did it in a more interesting way? So I don't know why, but I thought about this ribbon dancing sport, and it was so beautiful to look at, and that's how this thing started. And Alissar is going to talk about this more specifically from an animation sort of point later. But yeah, a lot of the details or a lot of the ideas came about because I was like, this is not interesting enough. And lastly, about design, there is a lot of Easter eggs actually in a lot of the locations, mostly in the story. In the story, you can actually find a little piece from every part of the film. Every scene in the movie is represented here with some element. The clock, actually, if you see it in the first scene, is 15 minutes before the last scene. So it actually works with the timing of the movie. Just so you know, that's really, really important to someone. So for animation, I'm gonna quickly go over where we started. When I started working with our amazing animators, they had this manual. So I'm going to show you some of the slides from the manual. Those are actually the slides. So they had this library of mouth shapes and hands and eyes, so they know basically the model of Albert and how he would what kind of shapes he does. Then I did this like quick hand gesture to convey the overall approach, because all I had at the beginning was the first animation test that I showed you with the older character. And so I had to bring more information before the animators started working on the film. Also, a big part for me was to keep everything clean. So with Quill, if you use the grab tool in a messy way and like too much, then the model can be a little messy. So that's from a technical standpoint. I told them if something becomes too messy, just like go back, take the part that you need and replace it. Some specific stuff about Albert. He looks terrible from the front, looks very creepy. So you always want to see him from 3/4 or side. And that was kind of like showing them how to make that happen for him, so he doesn't look very creepy. We have some smears and multiples through the film, so I wanted it to be pretty subtle. So that's the most, or like the most extreme it gets. I have to be more specific about that. And then we had a little walk cycle to show how Albert would walk, because I knew that in many parts you are going to see Albert walk. So because everybody started in the same time, I just wanted that to be unified. And so everybody is on the same page and they can take this walk cycle and use it in their animation. Now, to talk more specifically about the animation in Lifetime Achievement, I want to present to you Alissar.
Yeah, my name is Alissar Kobeissi. I'm one of the animators on Lifetime Achievement. I'm going to quickly talk about the animation style. Well, just how certain movements were implemented from the style that Yonatan had briefed us about earlier before we started, and how he wanted it to be cartoony, but not as cartoony as he had already tried it. At the same time, he wanted it to be somewhat grounded for the more emotional parts. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to jump into a step-by-step breakdown of my process on the carving studio from animatic to final animation. So here are some examples of how, like, for example, in the first video here, Yonatan felt like the movements that described Albert's personality best were precision and elegance, like a magician, he said. So that's how this was applied. In other ways, for the overall animation style, we tried to do things with fun rhythm, exaggerating the lead and follow, and isolating movements. That is when one body part is moving and the rest is kind of frozen. It's easier to pull this off in Quill than in 3D, because Quill is like a hybrid between 2D, 3D, and stop motion. So it doesn't look weird, as opposed to somehow if it were to be done in 3D. So that was cool. So to jump into the carving studio. So yeah, I started with an animatic that Yonatan had drawn beautifully with great detail. Yeah, like I wanted to add that his choreography was inspired by urban dancers, which is a cool fun fact. And I found it super, super cool and appealing. So I'm just going to play that here. So that was super cool animatic. So I had to take that and translate it into a believable 3D world. I'll just show you real quick the final result, and then we'll talk about how we got there. Yeah, so as you can see, it's not crazy different from the animatic. It's pretty much just like more fleshed out. So going from 2D to 3D was not as obvious as I thought it would be, as I thought that most of the animation was pretty straightforward to translate. It was not always the case. So I'm just gonna break down how I went around the general approach and then to the more complex movements. So, for example, on this movement, I would start with blocking out like a few poses that I would take from the animatic. I would translate them to what looks the most appealing on the model. And then I would go ahead and start in between the body. In this case, I animated both the head and the body together to decide on what's going to lead and what's going to follow. So I thought it would be fun to like lead with extremely dragging the head and the torso back, and then the bottom part of the body would like drag, and then it would catch up and it would kind of drag back the head and the body, just to give it a more fun timing. And then I added on top, and after that, the legs to figure out the physicality of that movement and the believability, of course, and then the arms. After that, for more complex movements, it was less clear and straightforward for me to figure out how to tackle, because the drawings are cool, they're dynamic. Albert looks like he's having fun, so was Yonatan probably when he was drawing them, but none of the axes were clear to me. Depth was a mystery. I could not tell the right limbs from the left limbs, what was holding. So yeah, that was more of a challenge that I thought, but it was super cool to dig into. So the way I went around it was not too different from what I showed earlier. I started with I first started by slowing it down because it was too fast for a 3D model, and then I started by guessing what the poses would be like and where they would be in the 3D space. I knew that, knowing that I would maybe change the poses later on, but it was a great place to start. After that, I went ahead and just did the torso, like just the body piece, the spine, to figure out like the rotations, the axes, the lead and the follow, and how it's going to be around in the 3D space. And of course, the legs only existed at the parts of contact, so I'd know the height of the body. After that, I went ahead and in between the head, because I had no idea what the head was going to do. And then I knew that I had to fix it in some places so it doesn't move, so the move is not too crazy and going all around the place. So that was fun. Then I added the legs for physicality. And then I added the arms. It was super cool to do this in Quill because I could actually draw the trajectory of the carving tool in 3D space, and then I could just match the model how I wanted the trajectory to be, especially that it just moves crazy fast. So it was really cool to have this, and I could just trace over it with the model. And sometimes it would just be like a kind of like a stroke instead of the actual model on some frames, but it would just be for a frame or two. But it was cool because it's cool to be able to draw the trajectory into space, which I'm not used to having. And it definitely eased my approach to figuring out the trajectory of the carving tool. And to make those movements readable, like Yonatan mentioned, I used some smears and multiples, maybe more than earlier agreed on, but the scene required it, and they're super fun to make. So I just went crazy with them a little bit. But they were actually needed in some places to connect the eye, so that we have like a clear color on the screen to follow where a certain body part comes from and where it goes. I used it in a lot of places. But it was, like I said, just fun to do and important to read the motions. It's pretty much how I went around it. There were challenges, but they were really fun to tackle, and ended up looking really cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
Awesome. So
Alissar.
now we're gonna have Tyler.
All right, let me switch on over to VR for this one.
Yeah.
I can't believe first time I see Tyler's face.
He was a mystery avatar, a pixelated avatar, until now we see the high def
that's the
version.
image I had in my head of it.
I finally got above more than like 16p. Okay. Okay. Ready to go. Oh, I just need to share it. There. Let me
make sure you check the optimize for video playback, but no sound.
Yeah. Virtual desktop is so good. Let us find it. There we go. Can we see it? Can we get?
We see black, but we see Quill. Perfection.
Yeah. All right. Let me go in there.
So streamlined. I like it.
Oh, I have turned on wireframe. Okay. So, hello everybody. I am Tyler Friedel. I also was an animator for Lifetime Achievement. So what I'm going to be going over is the time lapse that occurs during the lab scene. So to do that, I had to create a color shifting skybox, which, kind of what we're seeing around here, a moving sun and moon that would shift around while you're at the bottom of the lab, and change the entire environment's colors. And like most things that Yonatan came to me with during this project, my answer to it was, I don't know if I could do this, because at this state in the game, optimization was already a pretty big deal. I had done a pass or two on Acts 1 and 2, and we were already starting to push about a gig, and the frame-by-frame animation on Albert was just so much that we were running out of memory, and it was pretty bad. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show the full day-night cycle loop really quick. And yeah, it seemed pretty simple, but it under the hood is actually kind of terrifying. So when it was first brought up, Yonatan kept saying like, oh, we'll get around to the time lapse. We'll try it. We'll see if it can even be done. And every time that would happen, my brain thought, okay, so I'm going to get in there, try it, and then we're going to move on to the next task, because there's no way we're probably going to accomplish this. And, at that whole time I'm thinking already, like, how can I do this? What is a way to get this entire environment to change? So the first thing I think of is, it was back to Yari's stream in which he was showing us how to do these fancy little transitions where you would take one thing, you would bake it out. Oh no, it's not a sequence. Let me put it in a sequence. I tried to set this up back before the thing. Come on. There. So, if you're curious about it, Yari's stream will talk about how you can bake something and transform or reverse it. So it'll be kind of like a shifted gradient. But the problem with doing that is this entire environment would be frame by frame, adding more memory to the already memory bloated animation. And one of the also big problems was this fence. Whenever I gave up the original, let's frame by frame color change it physically with the color change tool idea, I thought, okay, I'm gonna have to duplicate the whole environment and then change it using opacity keys. But when I did that, the environment itself was busting over the geometry because the peak is 794, and that's after this thing has been optimized to heaven and back. And that's when two of these environments are overlaying. The problem originally was that this fence, let me pull it up because I have the original fence in here. The original fence by itself was 321,000 polys. Double that's 600,000 polys. And that is a busted scene that you cannot work with. So what I had to do is I had to take the old one and kind of do this different shape that was much more optimized. I think this fence is, let me select it so I can see how much it is. Yeah, this fence is only 8,000 polys now. It still keeps the same kind of detail. And since you're so far back here and not looking there much anyway, I figured that was an okay thing to lose. So first thing I did was I made a night variant of the environment. Where is it? In the timeline. There we go. So this is the night variant. So originally, I just had to go from a day color to a night color. And it was going okay. We got it working well. And I sent it over to Yonatan. I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? And he was like, I like it, but I want more. And I'm like, well, what do you mean more? And he's like, I want it there to be a dawn color scheme and a dusk color scheme. And I'm like, that's 4 environments. And the draw calls are already through the roof with this like amoeba seed, man. I don't know what to do. It's actually way easier than I thought it was going to be because there's never going to be a point at which more than 2 environments are visible at any one time. Because after going in and editing all these opacity keys and spans so they turn on and off at the right time, at the very beginning, we have the daytime, and as it slowly moves in, the daytime will fade away and the sun, those are right. The sunset color will come in. At this point, the sunset's full color and the daytime is gone, and then it transfers into nighttime, and which nighttime hits for a second. And then we hit dawn, which is pink. And then we hit day, which is just the original color scheme. And it slowly gets faster and faster as the sun and moon go by. So that was a pretty lightweight solution to solving this issue. The next problem was Albert himself, because throughout this entire loop, since he's not part of the environment, he was just glowing. This was him, and even when it was nighttime, he was still this bright. And I couldn't do the same solution for Albert.
An important thing to mention for that set though, right? Like while you're fading, the draw calls double, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
whenever
because both are like overlap. Yeah, there you go. Wow.
Yeah, like here, it's just the dusk, so it's only at 38. But as soon as I go 1 frame forward, it goes 58 because it doubles the environment. There are 2 environments overlaid on top of each other.
That is always the dilemma.
Z-fighting, right?
Z-fighting behaves really weirdly when this happens, and I can't explain it. I don't know. It's like a weird science where I don't know if it's like the most recent duplicate will like override the one under it, but as soon as you move it, like if I were to take, so I don't know if I want to do this because it'll break it. If I go to move it with that, with the gimbal there, if I move it ever so slightly and then undo it, it will completely break it and then it will Z-fight. But if you don't move it, it will not Z-fight.
Oh wow!
Okay.
It's really weird. I can show it at the very end because it'll break it, but just touching up on the last bit with Albert, I could not duplicate him because if I select him, these are all frame by frame animation. And just to show you how much that will add, right now we're looking at 197.1 megabytes. If I duplicate Albert, we're looking at 234 megabytes. That added about like 30, 40 megabytes. And at that point in the game, like Goro was, fiddling with this. I was fiddling with this whole file scene. At the very end of this project, one stroke like that put it over the line, and it was too much memory. So we were working with actual bytes by the time this thing was said and done. So what we had to do here is I had to go in and manually tweak Albert and paint him frame by frame for the color scheme. And it's not a perfect thing. There's no blend because the environment is able to blend because it's transform keys. Albert, I had to just paint with overlay keys and stuff. So it's not perfect. Like here, he doesn't change color during the switches, also to save memory. If you even go really nitpicky, you'll probably hit like there where he's technically in the sunset version, but there's nighttime, but it goes so quickly, you don't really see it. But just to show the environment and how it will break with the Z fighting. So let's go here. Wait, sunset is here. So if I take it and move it up and I undo, oh, okay, I guess it doesn't break. It used to break. We had an issue with that during the oven scene because when the oven kicks on, it will Z fight. And this scene didn't for some reason. Couldn't tell you why. But yeah, if you move it just the slightest bit, then you get some Z fighting. So, yeah. By the end, I would say the solution that I genuinely did not think I would be going with, I used every single solution to solve it. I didn't think I'd be using frame by frame with Albert because in the optimization portion, frame by frame was too much, but I did it. With the environment, I didn't think it could handle the draw calls with the following scene here with the amoebas, but I duplicated the environment 4 times and it all worked out okay. So yeah, that is how I kind of tackled what I thought would be impossible task of the day-night cycle, and once again made that a reality.
Tyler, do you mind if I take it away from you?
Steal it. Steal it.
I'm stealing it. All right. So actually, I have nothing to share. I don't have a presentation. Unless you guys want to see a bunch of numbers on a Google Sheet. I'm a producer. I'm not a very technical person, so be patient with me. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that this is not the entire team. We also have Lee, Samuel, and David who worked with us on animation. And I personally feel very lucky to have all of these very talented and sensitive people. And as you can see, we had a lot of creative problems or challenges and also technical challenges that we overcame. And I think to kick this off is, first of all, we need to talk about the pandemic, because really working remotely was really a gift, I should say. We treated the pandemic as an opportunity rather than a limitation. In this day and age, all we need is the computer and a Wi-Fi connection. So basically, it gave us the liberty to source out the people that we want to be part of this project, because as you can see, we needed people with certain sensitivity to tackle not only the big challenge, because it's a longer piece and it has a lot of scenes and environments, and there are transitions from scene to scene, so it needs to be seamless, but also to bring the life that we wanted to the characters. So it really gave us a chance to think outside of the box and kind of say, hey, we can work with Alissar, even though she's in Paris and we're like in a different time zone. So it really opened up a lot of opportunities for us. Working with an international team really brought in new perspectives. Everyone had an experience in something, whether it be character animation, more on the special effect, more on 2D or in VR. So it really helped us come together and express our own gifts to serve the story and to serve the characters, which was really, really nice. It was really a pleasure working with everyone. And it wasn't all work all the time. We also had a lot of like happy hours, and we tried to make our workspace feel human and connected, even though we're working in front of a screen this whole time. So that was not a challenge, but like a success. We talked about dragons and dungeons and dragons and dungeons, and we had Alissar's cat Zaytun showing up to every single meeting. So I feel like we really created small family, and it became very intimate, the creation process. So collaboration was really, really a key thing here. What was also very important is communication, because we didn't want it to feel like we're just working on a computer. So we wanted to make it personal, not only for us to connect to the story and the characters, but also for the workflow, for it not to be dry. And then I think Yonatan talked about the voice actors. I'm going to touch a little bit about that. I know you want to hear more about Quill and animation. So the voice recordings we did from afar through Zoom, which was not ideal. We all know that a physical presence and being together in the same space, even with animators, is like ideal. But through Zoom and through communication, we managed to keep everyone engaged. And that is really shown, I feel, in the in Lifetime Achievement. So we had a very strong vision to what we need to accomplish. Flexibility was also very important, especially because we needed to bring people together for the transitions. So one person who finishes the scene, the next person starts a new scene, they need to know what's happening. So there needs to be a sort of a sync between all of the animators. We need to make sure that Albert is acting the same way and having the same gestures. So it was really a group effort that Yonatan kind of led and monitored that everything is just on the same level. We also needed to be flexible because of COVID, and a lot of our team were not in the same place. And for example, Daniel, which you'll hear more from him after me, our composer started working in LA and then moved to Israel and then came back to LA, and everything was, we need to live in the moment and just play with the cards that we have. So the last thing I just want to say is that this team really, how many people were on the production team? Production-wise, it was only me, but we had 5 animators, and Daniel was our composer. So it was a really, really small team and intimate connection. And I feel like the workflow really facilitated the work that we need to do. Hence, I'm not going to show you the Google Sheet, and the way to share our passions and our tips, because as Tyler said, optimization was a huge challenge, and we kind of borrowed from one another and share bugs and things that we, needed to overcome. So work and passion, and I feel like this is the ideal situation for a team to work. So I'm gonna zip it. I'm done. I hope if anyone has questions, feel free to ask them later, and I'll do my best to reply. And I'm gonna pass the baton, which I don't have, but we'll imagine, to Daniel, our composer, who did an amazing job. Take it away, Daniel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ziporen. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, wow. I learned so much from this class, to be honest, about the process that pretty astounding, to be honest. I mean, wow. Yeah, great job, you guys. It's beautiful to see the process that you guys did. What can I tell you about the music? First of all, I think that's the third project I'm doing with Yonatan.
Yeah.
And it's been it's been an amazing pleasure to work with him. He's so talented and he's so, generous. Getting feedback from Yonatan is just like one of the best experiences I had in this project. Imagine waking up to like a 12 minutes video of him talking about almost every note, every moment, every emotion. It's a true pleasure. Yeah. Sorry, Yonatan. I should have prepared you, but yeah.
Yep, it's okay.
Yeah. So I think that what we tried to do in the beginning, Yonatan and I, is to crack down and find the melody, the theme of Albert's mom. I think when you talk about music, it comes down to emotion and finding that essence of the journey. Why are we watching? Like, why is the journey happening at all? Is the reason mom is the reason. And I was able to connect to that emotion as well because I live in LA and my mom is back in Israel and I miss her very much, and the whole thing that Yonatan told before. So it was very easy for me to connect to it. I think we nailed it after like the second try or something. Yonatan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember it was very...
Yeah, no, I want to correct you. You nailed it after the second try.
Yeah. Okay. No, it was a mutual process, but thank you. After that, we went on to find the sound of the jewelry, like the piece. The theme was very fun to write. It was very simple. Yonatan inspired me to look for like references in the classical world. For instance, I think what I listened to the most at that time was like Mozart's The Magic Flute opera. And we decided to start the film, like the main title sequence is like a very opera-like exposition of the theme. What else? Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge and what was the most fun of writing the music for Lifetime Achievement was just like having this theme, the jewelry theme, go through a journey with Albert and like transitioning from one scene to another and just coloring it. Orchestrating it, but it's like using different colors in music to convey a completely different environment each time. So I really liked it. We I don't know, covered like 10 scenes or something like that with the music in like 15 minutes or something. That's a very hard challenge, and it was incredibly fun to do. The last thing I will tell you about the music is that I tried to hide some Easter eggs throughout the score. And almost, like not all, but almost most of the scenes have like an influence from a very big classical composers. For instance, like I said, the Magic Flute by Mozart is covered in the main title sequence. For the very fun scene that Alissar showed us before, that the dance in the carving room is inspired by Shostakovich's Waltz number 2. It's a very famous piece. I made a list. It's very long. The underwater world was influenced by Clair de Lune by Debussy. You don't necessarily hear the piece, but the harmony, the overall sound is like something that I explored at the time. Obviously, for the spaceship sequence, I imagined, like, I used the planets by Holst. You can also hear it in Star Wars and Gladiator, and so. The lab. The lab. I really felt this like Renaissance feeling, and like something new is being created. So I went with Vivaldi, the Four Seasons. There, if you listen carefully, there are 2 different violins, one pan to the left and the other one pan to the right, and they have like a very minimal, but you can hear a dialogue between them. I think that is very characterized in the Renaissance period. And the last item on the list is the gold tasting room, where I used like the influence was Ravel's Bolero. Like you can hear the snare drum drumming like the same in Ravel's piece. So there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Easter eggs. And I think that's about it. If you have any questions, go ahead. But if not, I'll hand it back to Yonatan with the beautiful outfit. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much. And I want to just take this opportunity to thank my team. I've done it before. I'm going to do it again. You guys are absolute best. And I'm so grateful to have people around me that are better than me at what they're doing. I think that's just, a blessing. And so I was so fortunate to have you all on board. And of course, Lee and Samuel. And I want to also mention the sound effects people, Paul Gorman and Jay White, who worked on the sound, and everybody else that helped on the project. Of course, Goro and Ryan. It's been just an absolute teamwork and such an amazing experience for me.
And David.
I said David.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I said the people who weren't here.
We're here.
He's here. Okay, well, if you have any questions, we all would love to answer them.
So I think there was only one question that wasn't covered, and Ziporen and Alissar and Tyler have been answering like all the questions in the chat, which was like really streamlined. I think one thing we missed was like when you showed the concepts, Yonatan, there was a question from Diana David who asked, like, so were the concepts all drawn in VR, or was it like more like how much was like traditional and how much was VR?
Yeah, I think for the most part, my process was doing concept in Photoshop and then taking it to VR. I think only for the scenes where I needed to get a better understanding of how the environment is structured, I did a little sketch in VR. But majority of it was made in Photoshop, but I think in every single one of them, I did the thing where I showed at the beginning with the store, where I did something in VR, went back to Photoshop, did something in VR. I just had like a better, grasp of the designs in Photoshop and the modeling and the environmental stuff in VR. So I had to juggle between the two.
Cool. Gilgamesh is asking, I don't remember, was there any synchronization between music and animation?
There was a dialogue, of course. That's a given. In Alissar's piece, it was interesting because she had the music, right? You had the final music when you started working. No? There was something weird about.
No, I simply had the whoopla and the.
No, Yonatan.
Somehow, like it just clicked, right, Daniel?
No, it didn't.
You made it click.
It took me a lot of time to find all the sync points and everything to
Never
match.
mind. We did the animation, and Daniel made it work.
Well, so that's actually reverse of what it usually is, right? Usually, like you
Exactly.
animate to lip sync or to music. That's amazing. Like it felt really like it's flowing like a waltz together. You know, it was
There's a really nice rhythm to the animation. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Daniel made it work.
I think the way that we actually did it was when we had a good enough rough animation for an act or a scene, then we would give it to Daniel as a 2D file, and we kind of let him do his thing. And then as we're finalizing the animation, we would also finalize the music. So it goes hand in hand.
That's awesome. Big Dave is asking, does your team have any history of working together? Was that already in VR? And if yes, was it already in VR?
No and no. I mean, the only people who worked together in this team was me and Daniel. As we mentioned, Daniel was my composer for the two final student films that I made that were very versatile. One was a music video. The other one was more of like a film. But this one was definitely the biggest undertaking for both of us. But the rest of the team, we've never met before. I mean, of course, I met Ziporen. I knew Ziporen from before, but we've never worked together. So it was all a big risk. And if someone, happened to have sucked, it would have been horrible, and there could have been no way back. But yeah, no, I had a strong feeling about all of them, and everybody. Like, I don't know, it's a blessing. It's God that sent everybody, and everything just clicked. So we never worked together before, especially not in VR. This is also my first big VR project. So I was just fortunate that it worked out.
It was so funny every week during the weekly team meetings hearing Yonatan be like, guys, everything is running smoothly and I'm scared. I it's like, it's too good. Everyone asking me how it's going, and it's too good, and I'm scared. It was seriously great. It was so smooth. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense. I'm scared for the next project. It can't go on like that.
All right, Doron Meyer has a question. Take it away.
Hey, Yonatan. Shalom, everybody. So with all the environments that you had there and all the different options, how do you keep yourself? This is a problem I face a lot. How do you keep yourself from just getting lost in your own head in all the options that could be, and just kind of go like, okay, I'm stopping it now and I'm moving on?
That's a good question. I actually think that because the sheer amount of environments that I had to create was just so much that I had enough on my plate that I didn't feel like I needed to do more. And I know that, there's always like this stage at the beginning of like developing something that you have all those opportunities. And I totally relate to that feeling where you just, you want to do everything. And I feel like with this one, I kind of satisfied that need because I had so many environments. So I felt like I did do everything. And I did feel like it was like a first project thing that I just like wanted to do this tone and that thing and that environment and this, feeling. So for each one, I was able to somehow focus it on what the theme was for the specific stage of creation, and then kind of like narrow down, make it more focused. But overall, there was just so much that I didn't feel like I was missing out or anything.
Also, I think, Yonatan, that in a very early stage, we planned ahead really, really well. We broke down every environment, everything that needs to be done. And we also took some, 2 weeks for everything else that we might want to do. So eventually we ended up doing almost everything that we wanted.
Yeah, and that was definitely thanks to you, Ziporen, because I don't have that part of my brain to do too much in advance the way you do. That's why I need a producer on my side. But you're right. Yeah, we started ahead. We hired more people right away, and we took more time for stuff that we wanted to make happen. And I think our schedule was like just right. And that was just because of some planning ahead.
I see there are a lot of people asking about the time and the time frame. So allow me to answer here in case anyone missed it in the chat. We started production in June, and we launched in December, but obviously we took a while to do pre-production. So I don't really can pinpoint it. Again, COVID kind of. What was?
That was a perfect cat.
Let's. Alissar, bring Zaytoun as well. We had like 3 to 4 months for pre-production, for all of the designs, for all of the schedule, the modeling, all of that.
Yeah. Well, the thing was that it was only me on the production before we hired the animators. So I basically had to make all the designs, all the environments ahead, all the characters, all the assets. Everything was prepared ahead. So when the animators came in, they just had their scenes, most of them, fixed and ready just for animation. And so it was a longer pre-production phase because it was only me working on it. But then once the animators came in, it just like accelerated and became really fast-paced.
Awesome.
Yeah, the amount of pre-production and previs was so like in quantity, both quantity and quality. Like when we were brought on, like he showed us the storyboard and the animatic. I'm like, where do you need us? Like it's done. What do you? It was just so good. You just hopped in and it was there. Like had a question, it was answered so fast. And I know there was a bit of mentioning just how good Yonatan's critique and feedback was. Yeah, you'd wake up the next morning with like a 12-minute video of just some pinpoints and highlights, and you just do your thing, and it'd be good. And it was so great for pre-production. It was so good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Alex M is asking, love the film plus the bonus content you shared in Media Studio as separate pieces. Can you talk a little bit about the compromises you had to make to have the film fully optimized? What was the hardest creative decision you remember?
Yeah. So as I said, we almost split the film in two, which I hated the idea of. And I'm glad we didn't have to eventually, but it was so tight. It was really, really tight. As Tyler said, it was like, at the end, we really like, if you added one brushstroke, it would have just go over. We weren't really ready for it. It was supposed to be like a 5 to 7 minute long film. And we just started working on it with the animators. And when I handed the scenes to the animators, I told them to take the animatic as kind of like a reference, but really fill out the actions and give it like a more of a breathing room. And that's what they did. And so every scene kind of extended a little bit more, and it just blew up a little bit. But I didn't mind that because it was the right choice for each and every scene. Because really, the way they didn't overdo it. they just made the scenes work. Also in space, there were so many things to accommodate for when you translate a flat animatic to the way it happens in VR. So it really became a longer piece, and there were just a few, like the 1 or 2 last months were super stressful because Tyler and I had to work tightly and make sure that when we piece the different acts together, everything can actually happen. And it was especially the case with the time lapse. So the time lapse almost was thrown out. I really didn't want to, but the only piece that was cut out was the concert scene, which I actually like it a lot. We just thought, process-wise, for the jewel and its own evolution, that was a thing that we could skip, because in the other ones it was either like a very dramatic change, or it was a scene with mom's phone calls that we couldn't give up on. So that just led us to choose that one, unfortunately. But I was happy that we could find it its own place in the supplemental materials.
I mean, that one was like almost done, right? Animation-wise?
It was done. It was done.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. I really liked the color and the design and stuff, There was like, no, it's not in. But then having that in the supplemental pieces is awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was nice to give it its own spotlight as well.
I mean, we don't want to throw out, like, Daniel actually recorded a violinist from the UK, I believe. And we put so much resources into it. So we had to keep it somewhere.
Yeah, I remember just diving into Act 2 with the optimization scissors, and I think I got everything down to about a gig when you gave me the call to remove that scene, and that was probably one of my favorite environments in the whole film. So I was just like, I don't want to do this, but okay.
Yeah, only like 1,000 chairs in the the audience of that hall. So
yeah, I love that environment. It was so cool.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm curious about which shots are from David Hernandez.
Oh, yes. So I basically animated the gold tasting room and then the polishing room when he's running in the thing. I don't know what's the name of that.
The hamster wheel. The hamster wheel.
And then also like the beginning part of the last when the friend and the mom are talking, and then the friend just goes out. So basically until the point when Albert comes down and explodes and whatever. Like, so then until that point, that's where I animated all of those stuff. So yeah, but yeah, for me it was just basically everything was done for me. It was just like, yo, you go and animate. So and I went in and animated. So that was like, my contributing to this thing. And then I also wanted to mention a little bit of what Yonatan was saying. Like when I started on the project, I actually asked like Yonatan, like, hey, do you have like a tight frame rate? Because like, if you work in a movie, usually it's just like, oh, you have 24 frames, that's it. Like, you have to do anything you want to do in that. If you have a shot of 24 frames and you're like, oh no, I need 3 more frames, and they're like, no, because that makes the production value goes up, because then now you have to render 3 more frames, and now you have to do all of this stuff. And then so it was like a really nice thing that he was just like, oh, as much time as you need to just make the scene look better, you can just take those frames and just run with it. So that was good, I think.
Yeah, it was like the advantage of working on a Quill project that's not like a set feature length or a TV length or anything like that. The only limitation we had is the memory and the specs and the size of the file. But other than that, we could just do whatever we wanted. One thing about the vid scene with mom and her friend Vanessa, the first pass he gave me was so funny. Vanessa was just like shaking like crazy and was like super, super funny character. And I loved it, but then I was like, David, this is just too funny for that moment because it's supposed to be like a, like a sad moment where like mom is just like disappointed in her house, and then you see this other character and being like ah. So we had to like dial it down, unfortunately. But I wish we had like a different scene for Vanessa to just flourish and be her truth itself. That's like way more out there.
She definitely needs a spin-off for sure. Like, she's my favorite.
Or like at least a bloopers reel or something.
I
That would be
want
fun.
to say, David, I remember as part of the animation process, we also got like a blocking or a reference of a video that the animators took of themselves or like found footage. And I think that, first of all, David's reference videos were always so funny and so filled with characters, and also Lee was. I mean, we can't share it here, but the reference and the intention before actually starting the process is a really, really important thing, especially because we're working remotely. So that was our way to communicate about how it feels and how the animation behaves before. So David, it's just, they were candies.
That's awesome. You guys should do like a behind the scenes video where you include some of that. That would be awesome.
Yes, I want to see that.
I have a question from Nino. It's more towards Daniel in terms of composing. So were you able to sync the music to VR, or did you have to work from a 2D video? And at what point did you have access to VR? And also from your point of view, do you feel like it matters, like what version you see to be able to compose the music the way you want?
That's a great question, actually. One of the things that I was most afraid of in the beginning of the process is having to know how to work in a VR setting. To me, I usually work either in like a surround setting or a stereo, and just like trying to figure out how to do that just terrified me. And fortunately, I was surprised to see that we worked on like a flat 2D video. I think I scored the whole first act just like using the animatic as reference. And then after that, I started getting like the actual scenes, animated scenes, which was very nice. But yeah, I mostly worked on stereo. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think that the audio team, the sound designers, they mixed it into the VR space. And I was lucky enough to stay within the borders of the stereo.
So I would be interested, when you first saw it in VR then and hearing your music, did it kind of like feel different than what you expected, or was it kind of like, oh yeah, it actually works, you know? Like, or did you have like this moment, or was it like pretty streamlined?
No, it was pretty streamlined. To be honest, I was shocked by the film because I didn't see it. I couldn't imagine it before I saw it for the first time with Yonatan. But it was pretty streamlined. It was it sounded like a stereo mix, but in a very cool environment. Because I don't think it was mixed in surround or something. It was very simple to me, at least how it sounded, but in a good way. Like when you go into the hall and you see the whole thing and just the music reacts to it, it's really nice. I love the experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Question for Yonatan: is there any that comes from me? But is there any voices that you did in Lifetime Achievement, or is it all voice actors that you guys hired?
No, I don't think I did anything.
Oh, okay. I was like wondering if there's like an Easter egg, like the hoplux.
I didn't trust my my phone recorder. Not on this one. No, usually there is something.
All right. Cool.
On the next one.
Yeah, on the next one. Yeah, you should definitely do it. So we're like 40 minutes over, but I think this was like super valuable. This was super awesome. Thanks so much for this presentation. This has been another epic one. And yeah, congratulations to an amazing piece of work. Just mind-blowing what you guys have achieved. So with that, we can say maybe bye, everyone. Thank you so much, Yonatan. Oh, you have an outro.
Yes.
Oh no, here we go.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome.
And see you next time, huh?
See you next time.
Bye,
I have
bye,
a
everyone.
really